Ulster should have been dead and buried, but they rose again and snatched at the dead. My name's Mark, let's talk rugby. I watched this one today as live. I managed to avoid knowing the score beforehand, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was so much more enjoyable than it would have been if I'd known what the outcome was, because there's so many twists and turns in this. A little bit heart attack inducing, but definitely worth it in the end. Glasgow, much the better of the two teams all the way through, and that's the way it was at the start as well. They're bossing possession and territory. They forced a penalty from Ian Henderson, kicked that to the corner to go to that lethal maul of theirs. They get the initial momentum. Ulster don't quite halt them, but they just stop that initial drive, but it's still just edging forward, and Ulster desperately trying to keep them out, but it's in vain. Over the goal, and last year's top try scorer Johnny Matthews in to open his account for the season. Conversion is missed by Jordan, and it's 5 points to 0. Plenty of zip in that Glasgow play as well, when they're throwing the ball around. Great aggression and line speed in defence. Ulster looking very pedestrian in comparison. Ulster do find a spark though. They managed to get forward. They camped on that Glasgow line. Forwards going one out, but it's slow. Every time, they have to think about the setup, think about who's going to carry, where they're going to carry, who's going to latch, etc. And it just allows that Glasgow defence to get men back on their feet and hold them out. Then when Ulster go wide to Lowry, he makes a little bit of ground, but then they recycle and they get held up over the line. Back we come for a penalty, and Doak slots that for 5-3. Ulster do cut the deficit, but that really felt like a Glasgow win in that little battle of the game. Glasgow then back on the attack, but New Ulster fly half. Morgan manages to charge the kick down, hacks it on again. He gets caught about 5 meters short of the line. Glasgow initially scrambled really well, but a few phases later, Morgan burrows over to score, and the difference there really was that Ulster, probably for the first time in the game, actually moved the ball from contact a lot faster than they were the rest of the time. And although Glasgow did scramble, because of the speed of the Ulster ball, it meant that they were able to find a mismatch there. And I think it was Morgan against Richie Gray, and he was just able to, too much space, able to get over to score. Converted for 10 points to 5. Ulster, as I said, so much sharper that time than we'd seen for the opening, wherever it was, 15 or 20 minutes up to that point. Glasgow then hit back shortly after, goes to corner from penalty, look to set up the maul. Darge is at the back, and he kind of just a shove kind of knocks him off his feet, so he breaks off instead. Then some good play from Dobie, gets him close. They're very close to that line, and then Venter crashes over to score. Jordan adds the extras, 12 points to 10. Glasgow deservedly back in the lead. Ulster then get a bit of momentum from a decent maul around about halfway, but the ball gets stripped. Glasgow did that a lot tonight. They weren't just happy with tackling the man to the ground. They were going after that ball, whether it was the strip or going for the poach. And they got so much turnover. But this time, there's a forward pass under absolutely no pressure as well, and had men and space out wide as well. Probably could have been another try for them if they just kind of, someone was obviously a little too eager and probably overran a little bit, and then the pass had to go forward to them. Then they do make amends, though, from winning a penalty at the resulting scrum. They're on top of the scrum for most of the night as well. And they go up the line, win another penalty, go to the corner. They've scored from the first two lineouts they've had in this position, but Ulster managed to halt them all and make it unplayable. So a little tick there for Ulster, because they struggled with Glasgow in this position those first two times. Ulster then conceded a penalty for tackling on the ground just on the stroke of half time. Glasgow up the line to the edge of the 22. They go to the maul again, but Dave McCann gets in there, turns the ball over. They manage then to get the ball off the pitch, and it's 12 points to 10. But Glasgow definitely the better of the two teams. Ulster, though, would have been happy getting in at halftime, only 2 points down. In the second half, then, a couple of dominant penalties in the scrum from that Glasgow 8, who, really had Ulster on a plate for most of the time in the scrum. When the replacement front rows come on, Ulster got a little bit of parity and starting kind of win a few penalties of their own, but certainly at the start of the game, it was all Glasgow in there. Then they returned to the Ulster 22 and kicked that ball up the line. Ulster managed to repel them, but then good work from Tuipulotu and a few others get them back to the edge of that 22. They exploit a misalignment in the Ulster defence, get in behind. Darge then dives over in the corner, but score is chalked off because there was an earlier forward pass. Glasgow then, plenty more possession, stretching out Ulster defence again, but not extending their lead crucially. Tom Jordan then gets a yellow card for head-on-head contact as he was clearing out Stuart Moore from a ruck. And, the extra man plus great impact from the bench gives Ulster a bit of impetus. The likes of Izuchuku coming on really did kind of step that Ulster game up as well. And the likes of Lowry and Stockdale carrying well too. And then Shanahan coming on at 9 really did make a big difference for them. Work it up to about 5 minutes out. They force a penalty, and there's a bit of a conflab about what they're going to do, because if they take the kick, they're leading the game. There hasn't been a score in the second half so far, but they decide no, we're going to go to the corner instead. They secure the ball in the maul, but Glasgow managed to push them towards the touchline, so they decide to break off the back instead. They work it back inside. Then we have a TMO check, but we can see that they lose the ball as they're going over the line, so we come back for the penalty. Then they decide they're going to go for a tap and go. Glasgow hold them out again, but they've been offside too many times in this period. So Richie Gray then, he goes to the bin as well. So for a couple of minutes, I think Glasgow were down to 13. Ulster then tap and go again, but they get held up over the line. Great defence from Glasgow. And at this stage then, they're back to 14 men. Ulster then work it back up to that line again. McCormick, McCann and Izuchuku all carrying well. Harry Sheridan goes close before then McCann stretches over to ground on the line. Morgan scuffs the very kickable conversion, 15 points to 12, and Ulster in the lead. Then even with 14 players, Glasgow continued to stretch their Ulster defence. Stain, Darge and Ferry combining really well out in the tram lines. Ferry with a lovely offload off the deck as well to Stain for his second involvement in the move, and he goes over to score to put the champions back in front. And it really was looking like the performance of champions as well. The way, even though Ulster were somehow sticking in there and getting themselves ahead, Glasgow, when they needed to, were getting the scores to get back in front. The conversion makes it 19 points to 15. We're almost done. Ulster though get last throw of the dice. They kick up the line into the 22 with a clock in the red. Glasgow though, all they need to do is get their hands on the ball, win a penalty, get a turnover. They've done it all night. They must have been thinking, we're going to do it to them again, and that's going to be it. We're going to have a win, and as champions starting off the way that they want to. But Ulster go through an unbelievable amount of phases. George almost gets his hand on the ball, like he was a split second, let's say, away from getting in there and winning that penalty that would have won the game for Glasgow. Ulster get themselves up onto the line again, and then Shanahan sneaks under the Glasgow defenders to ground on the line for the game-winning try. But we've got a TMO check, and you're thinking, especially Ulster fans must have been thinking, oh no, what's gone wrong? And Glasgow fans must have been thinking, oh wow, the win is actually still on here. But after the check, the try is good. Converted for 22 points to 19 full time. Fantastic performance from Glasgow, but it's Ulster to come out with the win in the end. So Glasgow, they're gonna play a lot worse than this during the season and win plenty of games. Playing below the level that they had in this one. They're on top in pretty much all facets of the game except for that final score. Up until that last gas score as well, it looked like just an assured performance of champions. As I said, they got themselves ahead at the right times in the game. They were leading at half time. They were leading like with less than 4 minutes left on the clock, and it really did feel like not like in terms of performance, like Glasgow were 15 to 20 points better than Ulster tonight, honestly. But if they had still gotten out of town, with that 4-point win, still would have been happy, As champions, they're obviously going to have a target on the back. So they're going to want to win these tight games and just make sure that they're at the pointy end of the table for most of the season. But, as I said, they play worse than this and still win, this season. So no shame, certainly, in the effort and the performance that they put in. It just wasn't right for them on the scoreboard. Ulster, they've got a lot of work-ons from this, set piece under pressure, especially that scrum. It was better, obviously, when the likes of O'Toole, it was O'Toole come on, right, in the second half. But still, definitely got to short it up. Like, you can't be going wherever it was 55, 60 minutes of the game and for your scrum to be such a liability. Line out didn't go great either. Defence was exposed time and time again as well. Glasgow are excellent in attack, and Ulster did manage, even though there was a lot of kind of dog legs in the defence, and you could see players stepping out of line, and it seemed like there was maybe, a lack of communication, or maybe just the speed and the pressure that Glasgow were putting on meant that you would have like a set of players, outside of the play coming up a little bit too early, and then Glasgow being able to get into that gap between the two parts of the defence. But certainly that's another thing that they need to work on. Very hesitant in attack as well. I thought when Shanahan come on, though, he did bring that little bit of zip that they needed in terms of just get that ball away from the base, of the ruck quicker, because when the ball's sitting there, you're just allowing Glasgow to reset the defence. And Glasgow with a fully set defence was very hard for Ulster to make any real kind of ground against, And even when they did, as I said, Glasgow were going for those strips. They were going for those turnovers as well. So even if Ulster were making ground, player will get isolated, ball gets turned over, and suddenly Ulster are on the defensive again. Anyway, so lots for them to work on, but they still got that score that won them the game as well. I think the confidence from that is going to give, accelerate the improvement that Richard Murphy is going to be looking for from this squad and this team, through the rest of the season. He's asked the fans to be patient with them. You can see that, there is a lot of work there to do, but, I think a lot of people have confidence in Richard Murphy that he's going to be able to get that work done and get the players to buy in as well. And we're expecting Ulster to improve as the season goes on. Not necessarily game to game, improvement doesn't work like that. You have to have setbacks along the way as well. But we should, by the end of the season, certainly see a much better Ulster team than we saw tonight. But for now, they're going to have to cope without some very key players who are going to be away with the Emerging Ireland Tour as well. So definitely a lot of, challenges for Ulster to face to come. But this, it wasn't the, bonus point on either side that we saw in the other games that I was covering this weekend. But still, it was a very entertaining game. And, I still don't know how Glasgow didn't win it. And I was a Glasgow fan, like, it's just shaking my head at that. But as I said, Glasgow can be proud of their performance, but it's Ulster who took the win in the end. Just a quick correction before we finished. I said, in the review there, that Ulster, they converted the final try. They didn't. I just assumed, because I never actually saw the kick, and it was only when I put them through or together the graphic for this, I noticed that they didn't actually convert, and the final score wasn't 22-19, it was 20 points to 19. So apologies for that, but at least I caught it before the video went up. So that's the end of this one. We will have a review of the entire round coming out tomorrow night, Monday night, and we'll go through each of the games there, in obviously not as much detail as we do for these individual ones, but we certainly try and hit the highlights of each of them, and then we'll just kind of have a view of how at least the European teams have gone in the first round, because obviously the South African teams don't join the party until the next round. But that's it for me. You guys keep safe, and I'll see you on the next one.